Yet, imagine a conflict so vast, so brutally destructive. It claimed more lives than World War I war waged, not between nations, but among countrymen. This is not some ancient forgotten apocalypse. It happened just 150 years ago in China. What if I told you the architect of this slaughter was a failed scholar who believed he was the younger brother of Jesus Christ? This is the unbelievable, terrifying true story of the Taiping Rebellion.
The scholar, the vision, and the birth of a new king. Every cataclysm has a quiet starting point, a moment when the spark of chaos is lit in the mind of one man. For the Taiping Rebellion, the bloodiest civil war the world has ever known, that man was Hong Xiuquan, and his journey began, paradoxically, with failure. Hong was a scholar, born to a poor but ambitious family in a small village in Guangdong province. His one ticket out of poverty, his entire focus in life, was passing the rigorous imperial examinations, gateway to power, prestige, and security. He failed, not once, but 4 times over the course of a decade. Think about that crushing weight, years of study, the hopes of your family resting on your shoulders, all ending in rejection. Can you imagine the profound identity crisis, the deep existential bitterness that must have set in? After his third failure in 1837, Hong suffered a severe nervous breakdown. For 40 days he lay gravely ill, experiencing vivid, hallucinatory dreams. In his fevered state, he claimed he was transported to a celestial palace where a venerable old man with a golden beard and a black robe whom he identified as the Heavenly Father complained to him about the world's moral depravity. The old man, Hong claimed, gave him a sword and commanded him to purify the earth of demons and idol worship. He also met a middle-aged man who Hong would later refer to as his elder brother, who guided him. He recovered, but the visions remained just abstract memories until years later, when he stumbled upon a Christian tract called Good Words, exhorting the age. As he read, the pieces of his breakdown suddenly snapped into place with terrifying clarity. The venerable old man was God, Yahweh, and the elder brother, that was Jesus Christ. Therefore, Hong Xiuquan realized with absolute world-shattering certainty he was the younger brother of Jesus Christ, chosen by the Christian God to found the heavenly kingdom on earth and overthrow the demons which he interpreted as the ruling Manchu Qing Dynasty. This was the quiet, dangerous genesis of the Taiping movement. A failed scholar, leveraging a few misinterpreted Christian pamphlets and his own hallucinatory trauma, turned failure into divine mandate. The question isn't whether he was delusional. The question is, how did this delusion manage to ignite a movement that would draw tens of millions of followers and lead to the deaths of over 20 million people? What was it about the social and political fabric of 19th century China that made it ready to be torn apart by a man claiming to be the Chinese son of God? The ideology of fire, building the God-worshippers' society. The divine mission was clear in Hong Xiuquan's mind, but a vision alone doesn't start a rebellion. You need an ideology potent enough to displace loyalty to the emperor and an organization capable of mass mobilization. This is where the God-worshippers' society, or Baisheng Diwi, comes in. Hong and his closest friend, Feng Yunshan, realized they couldn't preach this radical new faith in the established centers of imperial power. They retreated to the mountainous, marginalized Guangxi region, a place rife with ethnic tension, poverty, and banditria, perfect tinderbox. They targeted the Hakka people, an ethnic minority already alienated from the Han majority and the ruling Manchu elite. Why the Hakka? Because they were outsiders, they were mobile, and they were already accustomed to fighting for their survival. They were ready for a revolutionary message that offered a new identity and a new destiny. The Taiping ideology was a bizarre, yet highly effective, blend of Christian monotheism and ancient Chinese utopianism. They rejected Confucianism, the moral and political bedrock of the Qing state as the teaching of demon spirits. They shattered idols in temples, from Buddhist statues to Confucian tablets, declaring that Yahweh was the one true God and Hong was his Chinese son. But the appeal wasn't just religious, it was profoundly socio-economic. Hong promised the heavenly kingdom of great peace, Taiping Tianguo, a literal utopia on earth. This utopia included radical reforms, communal property where all land was to be divided equally among all families, gender equality, which was revolutionary in 19th century China, allowing women to serve as officials and soldiers, and the abolition of oppressive practices like foot binding and opium use. They offered a moral code, a new family unit, and genuine hope for the poor and dispossessed. Imagine the power of this message to a starving peasant or an oppressed laborer. The emperor is a demon. His officials are corrupt, and their gods are false. But join us, and you will live in a society where land is shared, men and women are equal, and you serve the true God. This was an offer not just of salvation, but of a complete societal reset. By the late 1840s, the God-worshippers' society swelled from a small band of converts to an organized, disciplined, and zealous army of tens of thousands. They were no longer a religious sect, they were a counter-state in the making. The Qing officials, initially dismissing them as just another minor rural disturbance, were completely blind to the fact that they were staring at a mass movement built on both divine certainty and economic desperation. How could the complacent, centralized Qing Dynasty, which had governed China for 2 centuries, possibly contained a rebellion whose spiritual leader believed he had literally been sent from heaven? From village riot to imperial threat, the march to Nanjing... The Taiping movement quickly crossed the line from religious eccentricity to armed insurgency. In 1851, following years of skirmishes with local militias, Hong Xiuquan formally declared the establishment of the Heavenly Kingdom of Great Peace, Taiping, Tianguo, in the village of Zi. This wasn't just a political declaration, it was a brazen act of treason, a direct challenge to the authority of the Manchu emperor. Hong now styled himself the Heavenly King Tianwang. What followed was one of the most remarkable and terrifying military campaigns in history. The Taiping army began its long, relentless march north. They were not a conventional army. They were a collective, fueled by religious zealotry and military discipline. Their soldiers, known as longhairs, because they refused to shave their foreheads in the traditional Manchu style, fought with a fanatical bravery that astonished Qing forces. Their commitment to the cause meant they often fought to the death, believing they were securing their place in the Heavenly Kingdom. Their early victories were devastating. They took city after city, seizing weaponry, supplies, and, most crucially, recruits. As they marched, the promise of land reform and equality attracted masses of impoverished peasants, turning a few thousand zealots into an army of hundreds of thousands. By 1853, just 2 years after the Jinshan Uprising, the Taiping army had swept over 1,000 miles, crossing the Yangtze River and capturing its most crucial strategic prize, Nanjing, the ancient capital of China and a symbol of Han Chinese identity, was now renamed Tianjin, the heavenly capital. The capture of Nanjing was an earthquake that shook the foundations of the Qing Empire. It was not merely a military loss, it was a profound psychological blow. The Qing court, already struggling with the aftermath of the Opium Wars, suddenly faced an internal enemy that was not only massive in scale, but had also seized the economic and cultural heartland of the Yangtze Delta. This raises a crucial question about the failure of the Qing state. How could a dynasty that had successfully ruled for 2 centuries allow a rebellion to grow so exponentially, so quickly? The answer lies in the deeply ingrained corruption and ineptitude of the Imperial Green Standard Army, and the Manchu officials' fatal tendency to underestimate the ideological power of the Taiping. They treated it like a bandit suppression effort when, in reality, they were fighting a full-scale, religiously motivated revolution. The Taiping had gone from a failed scholaress vision in a remote village to holding an alternative government in China's great southern capital, a transition that signaled the beginning of a bloody, decade-long stalemate. The two capitals, Heavenly Kingdom versus Qing Dynasty's desperate stand. With the capture of Nanjing now, Tianjin, the Taiping Rebellion entered its decisive and, ultimately, crippling phase. The war was no longer a march, it was a grueling standoff. The map of China was effectively split. On one side, you had the Heavenly Kingdom of Great Peace in the south. Tianjin became a bizarre, isolated court. Hong Xiuquan, the Heavenly King, retreated into a life of religious mysticism and sensual indulgence, leaving the practical governance to his most trusted lieutenants, the various princes. The Taiping instituted their radical vision. Land was communally owned. The sexes were rigidly separated. Unmarried couples lived in separate barracks and, All wealth was pooled into a sacred treasury controlled by the central authority. It was a fiercely utopian, yet brutally authoritarian system. This religious fervor ensured absolute loyalty, but its rigid control over daily life proved stifling and, crucially, its leaders failed to build a functional, enduring state bureaucracy. On the other side was the Qing Dynasty, backed into a corner in the north. The traditional armies had failed catastrophically. The crisis forced the Manchu court to make a radical, system-altering concession. They allowed local Han Chinese gentry to raise and lead their own regional militias. This was a critical turning point. Previously, the Manchu rulers had feared arming and empowering the Han majority, but survival trumped caution. The most famous of these new forces were the Hunan army led by the formidable scholar official Zheng Gofan and the Huai army led by Li Mazhang. These were not the ill-disciplined imperial troops. They were loyal, locally funded, highly motivated private armies. Zheng Gofan, in particular, understood that to defeat the Taiping, he needed to fight ideology with counter-ideology. He mobilized support by emphasizing the defense of the core Chinese values that the Taiping rejected: Confucianism, family structure, and loyalty to the established order. For a decade, the war became a devastating cycle of siege, counter-siege, and scorched earth tactics along the Yangtze River Valley. This was a war of attrition where the human cost was simply staggering. But while the Qing forces were consolidating their counteroffensive, what was happening inside the heavenly capital? Could a kingdom founded on divine vision survive when its king was spending his days composing hymns and issuing increasingly erratic edicts, while the actual administration of the revolution was being outsourced to ambitious and often jealous subordinates? The answer lay not on the battlefield, but in the internal court of the Taiping itself. Internal cannibalism. The betrayal and bloody purges of the Taiping, the external conflict with the Qing, was horrific. But the true undoing of the heavenly kingdom was self-inflicted, a period of devastating internal purges known as the Nanjing, incidental 1856. This event shattered the Taiping movement's unity and zeal, proving that the greatest threat to Hong Xiuquan was not Zheng Gofan's army, but the paranoia and ambition within his own court. The initial success of the Taiping March had brought enormous power and wealth to Hong's original inner circle, the 5 principal kings or princes. But as the movement settled into its capital, the revolutionary zeal gave way to court politics. The East King, Yang Shuking, was the de facto premier and military genius behind the Taiping victories. He was charismatic, capable, and terrifyingly ambitious, often claiming to be possessed by the voice of the Heavenly Father, God himself, to issue commands to Hong Xiuquan. This was a direct challenge to Hong's own divine authority. Hong was the younger brother of Christ, but Yang claimed to speak for the Father. The tension became unbearable. Hong Xiuquan, secluded and increasingly paranoid, quietly ordered the North King, Wei Changhui, and the Assistant King, Shi Dekai, to eliminate Yang. What followed was a frenzy of unparalleled violence. In September 1856, Wei Changhui launched a surprise attack, slaughtering Yang Shuking and his family. But Wei didn't stop there. Driven by personal hatred and unchecked power, he massacred up to 20,000 Taiping loyalists and Yang's followers in a purge that lasted 3 months. The river outside the palace literally ran red with blood. The final, fatal blow came when the Assistant King, Shi Dekai, one of the rebellion's most popular and competent commanders, returned to Tianjin, horrified by the mass slaughter. Wei Changhui tried to kill him, too. Shi Dekai fled, taking a massive, loyal chunk of the Taiping army with him, effectively splitting the forces. Wei Changhui was eventually killed by Hong's remaining loyalists, but the damage was irreversible. The Tianjin incident was a catastrophic self-sabotage. The rebellion lost its military brain, Yang Shuking, its ethical core, Shi Dekai, and the unifying trust among its leaders. The purges wiped out the most dedicated, earliest adherents of the faith, replacing revolutionary fervor with fear and cynicism. How can a movement that claims to be establishing a heavenly kingdom of peace justify such massive, internal, and senseless brutality? This collapse of moral authority and military cohesion was the moment the Qing Dynasty truly gained the upper hand, allowing the imperial forces to tighten their noose around the heavenly capital. The vultures circled, foreign powers, and the rise of the local armies as the Taiping tore itself apart. The Qing counteroffensive gained irreversible momentum. But the final phase of the war was shaped not just by the Hunan and Wei armies, but by the opportunistic, complicated involvement of foreign powers. Initially, the Western nations Britain, France, and the United States maintained a policy of neutrality. They were fascinated, even cautiously optimistic, about the Taiping. After all, Hong Xiuquan claimed to be a Christian, and his movement presented an opportunity to weaken the isolationist Qing government. However, this neutrality began to shift dramatically. Why the change? The Taiping's actual policies were anything but friendly to Western trade. Their zealous anti-idolatry extended to desecrating Buddhist and Taoist temples, a fanaticism the West found unsettling. More importantly, the rebellion completely disrupted trade and threatened the treaty ports, the very reason the Western powers had fought the Opium Wars. The Qing Dynasty, for all its flaws, offered stability and predictability for commerce, while the Taiping offered chaotic revolution. So, the vultures circled and chose their side. Foreign merchants, mercenaries, and eventually official forces began to lend aid to the Qing. The most famous example was the formation of the ever-victorious army, a highly effective mercenary force initially commanded by the American adventurer Frederick Townsend Ward, and later by the legendary British officer Charles George Gordon of Khartoum fame. These forces, equipped with modern weapons and superior drill, played a crucial role in defending Shanghai and recapturing strategic cities from the Taiping. Meanwhile, the true heavy lifting was being done by the newly empowered Han Chinese regional armies. Zheng Gofen's Hunan army and Li Hongjiang's Hui army were meticulously tightening the noose around Tianjin. They fought with a terrifying resolve that mirrored the Taiping's initial zeal, recognizing that they were fighting for the very soul of the Chinese state, not just for the Manchu emperor. By the early 1860s, the Taiping was utterly exhausted, cornered, and outgunned. The rebellion's failure to capture key strategic ports, its internal collapse, and the sudden shift in foreign support which provided the Qing with a decisive technological edge sealed its fate. The only thing left was the final, brutal act, the siege of the heavenly capital itself. The end was not merely a military defeat. It was the final, harrowing realization that the promised heavenly kingdom on earth would instead become a tomb for millions. The final siege and the end of the Heavenly King, 1864, the stage was set for the final, bloody showdown at Nanjing. By 1864, the imperial forces under Zheng Gofen and his brother, Zheng Guoquan, had achieved a comprehensive encirclement of the heavenly capital. They didn't rely on simple frontal assaults. They employed a sophisticated strategy of entrenchment and mining. This was trench warfare before the trenches, a grim, inexorable tightening of the military vice. The situation inside Tianjin was apocalyptic. The city had been under siege for years, but now the end was imminent. Supplies were exhausted, morale was non-existent, and the citizens and remaining soldiers were starving. Yet, the Heavenly King, Hong Xiuquan, refused to admit defeat. He had completely detached himself from reality, proclaiming that the Heavenly Father would personally send divine reinforcements to destroy the besiegers. When his officials urged him to flee or negotiate, he commanded them to eat sweet dew, while Grasan declared the city impregnable. In early June 1864, the crisis reached its macabre conclusion. Hong Xiuquan, after eating the sweet dew he insisted would sustain him, fell gravely ill and died. The official Taiping account claims he died of illness, but many suspect he intentionally committed suicide by ingesting poisonous herbs rather than facing capture or compromise. His death did not end the siege, but it extinguished the last ember of divine inspiration. Just 6 weeks later, on July 19, 1864, the Qing siege engineers finished their work. They detonated massive tunnels packed with gunpowder beneath the city walls. The explosion tore a huge breach, and the Hunan army poured in. What followed was a massacre of unimaginable scale. The Qing troops, fueled by 10 years of bitterness, the desire for revenge for the lost lives, and destruction, and the sheer brutality of the Civil War, were given free rein. They slaughtered nearly 100,000 people, soldiers, women, and children alike, in a gruesome effort to wipe out every last trace of the Taiping presence. The young Heavenly King, Hong Xiuquan, Hong Xiuquan's teenage son, was initially smuggled out, but was quickly captured and later executed. The entire heavenly capital was reduced to rubble and ash. The war was effectively over. But the real question is, how do you measure the cost of such a victory? The Qing Dynasty had regained control of its empire, but at what price? Not only had the war claimed an estimated 20 to 30 million lives, making it deadlier than the American Civil War, the Napoleonic Wars, and even World War I, but the very act of fighting the war had irrevocably changed the nature of the Chinese state, leaving deep scars that would define the next century. The lingering ghost, how the Taiping cataclysm reshaped modern China. The Taiping Rebellion was physically crushed in 1864, but its colossal impact echoed through the next century of Chinese history. It was more than just a civil war. It was the death rattle of imperial China and a precursor to the modern age of revolution. First, the demographic and economic cost was staggering, with an estimated death toll of 20 to 30 million. Vast swathes of the Yangtze River, heartland China's agricultural and economic engine, were depopulated and devastated. The rebellion resulted in a famine and breakdown of infrastructure that took decades to recover from, severely hindering China's ability to modernize and respond to external threats. The Qing Dynasty was victorious, but it was now ruling a hollow empire. Second, the war permanently shifted the balance of power within the Qing political structure. The Manchu court's reliance on the Han Chinese regional armies, the armies of Zheng Gofan and Li Hongshang, was a necessary concession that fatally undermined the central authority. These regional leaders, not the imperial generals, were the ones who saved the dynasty. They gained immense prestige, political power, and creative control over vast regional military and fiscal resources. The decentralized power structure that emerged, dominated by powerful provincial governors, made the central government incredibly weak. This provincialism would plague China for the next 50 years, leading directly to the era of the warlords after the Qing dynasty finally fell. Finally, the Taiping Rebellion demonstrated the profound failure of the Qing to reform. The war should have been a wake-up call, spurring deep political and military changes. While there was a brief period of the fundamental problems, corruption, resistance to modernization, and a rigid political system persisted. The rebellion showed that massive popular unrest could be catalyzed by a potent, anti-establishment ideology, and this lesson was not lost on future revolutionaries. Figures like Sun Yat-sen, the founder of the Republic of China, drew lessons from the Taiping's mass mobilization, even using the term Taiping, great peace in his own revolutionary ideology. The legacy of Hong Xiuquan is not the heavenly kingdom he envisioned, but the 20 million ghosts and the shattered state that ultimately allowed the Qing dynasty to be overthrown less than 50 years later. The Taiping Rebellion proved that the imperial system was fundamentally broken, paving the ideological and structural road for the 20th century revolutions that would follow. Conclusion: the Taiping Rebellion asks us a terrifying question. What happens when divine belief collides with material desperation? It shows us the devastating power of a single idea, no matter how flawed or delusional, to mobilize millions when all hope is lost. This wasn't just China's bloodiest chapter. It was a brutal, foundational event that fundamentally shaped the modern country, teaching us that the cost of maintaining an unjust system is often paid in the most horrifying way possible. What aspect of this catastrophe do you find most shocking? Was it Hong Xiuquan's bizarre claim, the sheer scale of the death toll, or the way that Taiping's internal betrayal doomed the revolution? If you want to understand how a weakened China responded to the threats of colonization and internal strife following this cataclysm, make sure to subscribe and click the notification bell for our upcoming video on the final years of the Qing Dynasty and the Boxer Rebellion. Leave a comment below telling us which historical event you believe was the most tragically unnecessary.